Hey everybody, good morning. We are doing an Instagram Live this Friday. Beautiful January day in Nashville. We are going to have Dr. Ed Park joining us. I'm going to invite him in just a second, and we are going to have my dear friend and also another board member, Nikki DeLoach. It's going to be a great conversation. We're going to talk about a lot of new developments in Alzheimer's. We're going to discuss RELEVATE, the amazing supplement that Ed's company, NeuroReserve, started a couple of years ago, and why you need to take it for brain health. So hang on, guys, just a minute. There's Nikki. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, what up? Hi.
This is always my favorite. It's the Brady Bunch. Hi. Guess what? I have another special guest joining us today, guys. Say hi.
What's up, Hunter?
He's tired of listening to me do these, and he's never involved. So today he asked to be included. He has some special questions for you, Ed.
Oh, geez.
Okay.
Here we go.
Oh,
I do.
also, guys, that's actually a good point that Liz brings up. Hi, Kate Cruz. If you have questions, please dump them. I'm going to be in charge of tracking them. Okay.
Oh, thanks, Nikki. Okay, let's jump right in, you guys. I have a lot of questions for you today,
right.
Mr. Ed. You are always a wealth of information about the newest developments in Alzheimer's. And I know that you did a live recently with our good friend, Dr. Fenn, and you guys talked about some of the newest things going on in Alzheimer's. And I thought it would be really interesting if we could just out of the gate talk about there's been, this huge revolution in the Alzheimer's space about the whole amyloid and tau hypothesis and the things that have happened in that space that have changed dramatically the way that scientists and researchers are looking at ultimately developing a cure. So can you just tell us a little bit about what you know about it so far?
Also, for those that might not know, Ed, do you mind really quick, you guys, this is Dr. Ed Park, and just giving them a 60-second brief, this is who I am, this is what this is kind of what I do, and then, for those that don't know.
Okay, yeah. I'll make it 6 seconds. How about that?
Perfect.
I'm Ed Park. I'm the founder of NeuroReserve, and we're a brain nutrition company. So we focus on lasting brain health for people who really want to just take care of their brains. And that nutrition side, right, is very important because nutrition's a huge lever we can pull. It's a big lever. You can just pull it right down, and it could make a big difference in your long-term brain health. So that's why we focus in that area. And of course, we've developed a product for it, and we're developing future products for it as well. And kind of the same way that we all know each other is that we all have some family history in dementia. So my father, he had a form of dementia called Lewy body dementia, and he had Parkinson's, and it lasted for 19 years. So we all have our stories. I'm sure many of you who are watching have your stories as well, and you just want to do the very best for your families and take care of your brains. So that's what got me into NeuroReserve and founding the company. So
Thank you.
For everybody who's listening to, we are going to dive deep into Ed's product towards the middle of this video. I have some really specific questions for him about the breakdown of what's inside of it and why both Nikki and I are just such huge believers in Ed and in RELEVATE, because it's really, I get asked pretty much, I would say 3 times a week, what supplements do you take, Liz? What do you put in your body? And the answer is always, it's about, 3 small things, and it's all 3 of the capsules that come out of your product every day.
That's right.
It's about the only thing I do other than what I find in my refrigerator and on my my kitchen countertops. So anyway, more on that later, but I really want to take a dive into this new science and talk about the new drug that's come out and and why it's so controversial about whether or not it helps or doesn't help. Just think there's so much to talk about that's new and relevant with Alzheimer's. So let's get, what do you know about it, Ed?
Okay, well, yeah, so you know, if people and many people actually who are watching might have been following, you know, just generally Alzheimer's news, right? And so over the past 20 years, pharmaceutical companies have been trying to develop products to clear out this plaquey type stuff that builds up in the brains in many people with Alzheimer's called amyloid, right? So this amyloid builds up and it's in between all the brain cells, and it starts to, you know, the thinking is that it interferes with a lot of the processes in the brain. And so what happens is that eventually people lose cognitive function, right? And so they've been developing these products for it. And then there were all these failures, just failures of all these drugs that were able to clear it all out. And they saw it, they looked at the imaging, they took the MRIs and stuff like that. They saw that it's all gone or it's clearing out, but people weren't getting better. And so there was this, it's kind of like really feeling of you know, we totally missed, right? And then what happened is that last year, so on November 29, okay, so literally like a month and a half ago, right? What happened is that a company called Eisai, and Biogen, which is an American company, Eisai is a Japanese company, they both came together and developed a drug called lecanemab. And lecanemab is one of those drugs that is intended to clear out amyloid, but it works a little bit differently. And it turns out that this one actually did something. So this one actually did something reasonably clearly as well. And so what it did is over a period of 18 months, that was the usage period of this trial that they ran with it. What happened is that it slowed down the progression of loss of cognition, right? And so when people have early Alzheimer's disease, they're evaluated based upon, you know, obviously, you know, how well they do in certain areas of cognition. And of course, if that score starts to drop, you know, it'll drop at a certain rate, and then and that's how we know that they're going further and further into Alzheimer's. Well, it slowed it down. So it slowed it down. But now I want you to think of it this way. Imagine a train that is called Alzheimer's that's moving at about 100 miles an hour. Okay.
I don't have to imagine.
It's coming at you.
And lived it.
Yeah, it just keeps coming, keeps moving, it keeps progressing, right? So what they showed over 18 months, yeah, and I'm sure everybody and caregivers, many caregivers that you know that are in the Mind What Matters family, right? You know, you see it coming, and it's coming at 100 miles an hour. And what lecanemab did is it slowed the train down from 100 miles an hour to about 73. Okay. So what, at the end of the day, when you look at this New England Journal of Medicine article that came out, this big, huge article came out, right? You know, what it says is that there's been, you know, some modest, you know, reduction in the rate of decline. Now, there's a couple of things that also comes out of it too. Number one is they don't know if it's sustained after the 18 months. They only tested it for 18 months. Secondly, it only slowed it down by 27%, right? So 100 miles an hour to 73. So basically, you're still moving pretty fast, you know, that's the thing.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, when you're in it, as you know,
that is huge, right? Yeah, that is huge.
20%, 27%, like we'll take whatever we can get. Continue.
Yeah, and that's why it was actually so historic. What they did is New England Journal of Medicine, and there was a conference at CTAD, it's called Clinical Trials in Alzheimer's Disease, on November 29. And so, you know, it was great to be there and stuff like that to see all this go down. But like they released it online at the same time as they were presenting, like literally boom, you know, because it was such a big deal. Because being able to do something, even anything, slow it down, you can't stop it, but slowing it down a little is a huge accomplishment, actually. After so many years. So that's the really big news out of there. On the other hand, right, they still need to continue doing trials to make sure that the gains are sustained, or at least the slowing down is sustained over, you know, past 18 months. So we don't know if there's a rebound. We don't know if there's anything that goes on like that, right? And then the other thing is that you know, people are a little concerned about some brain internal hemorrhaging, side effects that come about from usage of the drug. So they're called ARIAs, ARIAs. So that's the main and most concerning side effect of lecanemab and other drugs like it that clear amyloid.
I have a question. Is
Mhm.
there anything that makes you prone to that? In the research, was there, you know, anything that would make you prone to the brain bleeds? Or was it kind of just all over the place of like who it would happen to
Mm-hmm.
in the
During the
study?
trial, they
Yeah.
realized that they had to be very careful with people with APOE4 on that. So, yeah, they had to be
They were the
very,
most susceptible.
yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, so people who haven't heard of it, APOE4 is a gene. It comes in a few different varieties, 3 different varieties, APOE2, E3, and E4, and everybody gets them. Everybody gets 2 of them. Okay, and some people get a mix of 3 and 4. Some people get a mix of 2 and 2, 3 and 3. You know, you can combine those all together. But if you can get a hit of 4, either once or twice, right, that raises your risk of Alzheimer's disease. And there's there's different factors that relate to the mechanisms behind that. But yeah.
So, I mean, I do want to say for anybody who's listening, you know, if you've done genetic testing, that's not a reason to freak out anymore. What we're learning is if you have 1 copy, you're 4 times more likely to get the disease. If you have 2 copies, it's 8 times more likely. But recent studies have shown with diet and exercise and other lifestyle interventions that people who have even 2 copies of APO4, as a matter of fact, the one that I'm speaking of came out of a study that was done in southern Italy where they adhered strictly to the Mayan diet. They had no higher rates of developing Alzheimer's. So that's important to hold on to, and, you know, just a little shred of hope there for anyone who has.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, you know, you have to decide if you want to know or not know. You know, you have to think that through. You know, sometimes you'll go talk with these genetic counselors because they can give more perspective on that. But there are things you can do if you do find out, whether or not you find out accidentally or on purpose. There are absolutely things you could do, and it can be very empowering actually nowadays, given what we know. So
one of the things I want to ask you about regarding the amyloid and this whole amyloid hypothesis thing, and even though lecanemab has definitely shown us so much promise and hope that at least finally something for us to grasp onto. You know, this is the first drug shown any type of promise whatsoever.
Yeah.
The most recent thing I've been reading and hearing about is that even upon autopsy in patients where amyloid has either been cleared somewhat or when there was actually virtually no amyloid or tau present in the brain, the person very clearly still died from Alzheimer's. So my question to you is, you know, how much stock are you putting in this? You know, have we been researching the wrong thing all along? And is the reason that we are so far away from a cure, is it that we really are not researching and doing trials on the right things?
Yeah. So what came out, you know, I think the biggest lesson, I mean, it's a huge question because I think it goes to a big, huge lesson that the scientific and medical community has gotten out of this whole episode over the past 30 years, right? Is everybody was thinking in terms of, oh, amyloid is it for almost 20 years now. They put everything into it and it took all the priorities away from all other things that could help people with Alzheimer's or help people prevent Alzheimer's. It took up all the air in the room. Literally, every single pharma company, the NIH, everybody locked themselves into this thinking that if we get amyloid, we're going to solve this thing. And we could have made so much progress in other areas. So the final lesson that came out of this was that, okay, we slowed it down a little bit, you know, with an amyloid clearing drug. Amyloid is a factor, but we know now that it's not the one and done answer. There are so many other things and that you allude to, right, where people who don't have any amyloid clinically have Alzheimer's, clearly. So there are many other factors that come into play. And so what's happened over the past 5 years is like all these different, like, you know, all these different drug targets have like popped up because everybody's starting to think a little bit more creatively, I guess. And of course, the nutrition side has been blowing up too, and lifestyle. There's been a ton of studies there, and a lot of which, you know, NeuroReserve You know, when I was founding the company, we were looking at it and going, this is great data that we can build stuff out of, you know, so.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a much more holistic. I think the medical and scientific community has learned a huge lesson there, and it's going to be much more balanced going forward, actually.
That's why I really wanted to kind of start this conversation with that question, because I think personally it makes what you're doing and what your product is doing and what so many other people who are really, you know, using food as medicine, I think it makes it so much more interesting and so much more relevant to the discussion. So let's dive into RELEVATE right now. So one of the biggest things that you've talked about most recently on your Instagram and just on other lives I've seen you in is, why are the omegas such a huge part of RELEVATE? And can you kind of break down the proportions of the different types of omegas that are in them? You know, there's 3s, there's 6s, there's 9s. Can you sort of tell us a little bit more about the product in general and why you kind of chose to put what you did in?
Yeah, so there's different types of omegas, right? So whenever people hear the term omega, and it has omegas in it, you want to think you want to look a little bit more carefully, right? If there's a lot of omega-6s in it, omega-6s are important, but we tend to get way too much of it because of how we eat nowadays, actually. That's one thing we're overboard on, quite frankly. And so what it does is it pushes out all the other omegas and kind of takes up room.
Okay.
So, and
omega-6s, like where do you find most in?
So in a lot of vegetable oils, things like that, a lot of things that we might fry our food in. You know, so that, you know, the omega that you really want more of is omega-3s, right? And so I'm sure some people may have heard omega-3s that are called like DHA and EPA. So
actually, I have a question on that, Ed, which I think so KSWILZ, she's saying, I take RELEVATE, but I'm not a fish eater. Yeah. A lot of people are popping up and saying that they've ordered your product, Ed, which makes me so happy.
That's great.
She's asking, the reason I interrupted is because she's asking an omega-3 question. So if she's not a fish eater, but she takes RELEVATE, should she add additional omega-3s? And also, what are your thoughts on lion's mane? She's asking.
Okay. Yeah. So for omega, okay. So, all right. I guess when it comes to the omega-3s, should she add more?
Should she add it because she doesn't eat fish, but she does take RELEVATE?
Yeah. Okay.
So should she add more omega-3s?
Yeah. So now when it comes to omega-3s, for the vast majority of people, it's absolutely fine to add more omega-3s, especially like, let's say if you are, you know, vegetarian or maybe just not a fish eater, I guess, right? So you can because fish are definitely the richest form of DHA and EPA, those good omega-3s that we just spoke about, right? So definitely you can add it in, right? You can add it in. And the question then becomes, well, what kind do I add in? Because they can either supplement in, right? And so on the RELEVATE side of the world, right, what we supplement with is a DHA and EPA that come from a herring roe. It's called a phospholipid or a phosphatidylcholine DHA. I know that's a massive mouthful. So, but basically, so it's a phospholipid type of DHA, and it's sourced from herring roe, the caviar or the little eggs, right, from herring, not actually from the fish, from their eggs actually. And because that's where you get this specialized DHA that can cross into the brain more efficiently than, say, a standard fish oil that you get, that you might get from, just kind of this salmon, herring, mackerel, whatever it might be. Now,
pause, Ed. I'm going to say that one more time because I want everyone to really pay attention to that one line right there. The omegas that are in RELEVATE are the ones that can actually cross into the blood-brain barrier, and your body can absorb them the right way and in the right proportions.
That's big.
That is, you can go to Walgreens and you can buy fish oil and DHA or whatever, and it might be, $8.99 or $12.99, but in this case, you're getting what you pay for, and you're probably just something that's going to take the scenic route out your bladder, out to a whole lot of effort and work inside your brain.
Not only that,
Yeah.
I mean, Liz, I remember whenever I was in college, I did like a test with vitamins, and I put them in water to see how long it took them to actually, you know, my brain's not working quite yet this morning, dissolve into the water, because my professor was essentially like, look, if they don't dissolve within this amount of time, you're just flushing them right out of your body, and it's a joke. Like, it's a joke. So I was able to see that some of them sat in there for days without dissolving, right? So you're just flushing money down the drain, because essentially, like you said, they just take the scenic route right out of your body.
I'm going to start using that now. That's a good one.
I love it.
I have such a way with words, you guys.
You really do. You really do. It's one of my 1,400 things I love about you. But it's such a good point. It does. And Ed, also to ask, this is a really important question too. Can people use your product, if they're allergic to fish?
Or vegetarian?
So that would be, okay, the answer to that is no. Okay, so I just want to be very, very clear, because it is, unfortunately, when we were looking at the proportions of DHA to EPA, 3 to 1, we're looking for that number. We're looking for that ability to cross in more efficiently into the brain. That came from that herring roe, actually. That really did. That was the source. So it had to be that particular source. I mean, for people who are vegan or vegetarian, you can aim for DHA supplements that are algal based, so it's algae based, right? They're gonna look and feel a little bit more like standard fish oil, so they're gonna be triglyceride form, as they call it. But it doesn't mean to say none of it's going to get in if it's that form, if it's standard fish oil or algae based. It just means it's not going to get in as efficiently, right? So the type that we have is like 2x, 3x more efficient, and it's very important for people with the APOE4 allele, right? But if you just give yourself enough of the standard, some of it will get in. It's probably a little bit geared better for heart health, but still some of it's going to get into the brain too. So you don't want to just give up there. I just want to give that piece of information out, because there are people who are vegetarian. Absolutely.
I want to be clear that heart health is brain health. When my dad, he had never had, if you guys are listening, you have not had an echocardiogram on your heart, please get one. Okay.
Yeah.
Please get one. Your heart health is directly tied to your brain health, as is your gut health as well. But my dad had an enlarged heart, and apparently we didn't know about it because he had never gotten it checked. And the doctors were like, it very well could have been what led to his early onset. And so check your heart, because, my kid has had 3 heart surgeries. There can be interventions that you can do to give yourself a heart that is fully functioning, so that you can live the healthiest life possible. So I just wanted to say heart health is brain health.
Yes, absolutely. Circulation, blood flow, all that. So
okay, ask 2 more pretty important questions here. And Nikki, I know you have to jump, but this is also, I think, just it alludes to why this product is so good. And I know I sound like a telemarketer at this point, saying how great I think it is, but really, I can tell
Liz, thanks. I appreciate it.
You care about people.
This isn't anything new. I mean, I've even laughed with Nikki about this. I can tell when I have, let's say I've gone on a trip and I've forgotten to take it with me. I legitimately can tell within a week that it's, out of my system, and I can tell I start sleeping differently, and my mental clarity is not as great. And I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I will say, and I don't even know if I fully believe it's a thing anymore. After having some kids with learning differences, I think maybe that's it all along. But I can honestly say, my ability to focus, think clearly, it really truly suffers if I go without it for a week. So that's why I stand behind it as just vehemently as I do. But let's talk about 2 ingredients, B12 and D, and why those 2 specifically are important, and why your brain needs them. So you want to talk about B12 first?
Sure. Okay. So yeah. So B12, I mean, it does a lot of things, right? B12 is huge for many, many different purposes. But specifically for the brain, right? What it does is it's part of a pathway that clears out certain toxins from the brain. It's very important. It's like a safety release valve. I mean, you got to have it, you know. And what happens is that it helps to lower the levels of a kind of a neurotoxic molecule in the body called homocysteine. So B12 helps reduce the levels of homocysteine, and homocysteine is toxic to the brain. That is probably one of the first and most key, most foremost things that B12 does from a brain standpoint. There are many other things too, because it helps in a lot of synthesis, you know, synthesis of DNA, things like that. But that's super important, and the reason why is because B12 is a big problem epidemiologically in our society, population-wise. It just is it's a problem.
Alcohol is one of the ways to strip yourself of B12.
You strip yourself of B12 there, just by aging.
Such a bummer.
I know, it's like, so there's like, you know, it's I thought you were reaching for a beer bottle right there.
Listen,
it's been a rough month at Bound. It's only a Friday here.
Yeah, but B12 deficiency, right, is a big and kind of sleeper problem that runs that underlies a lot of different health status, you know, of people in the country right now. So you know, when it comes to B12, there are, you know, as people get older, they might have acid. So you need really good acid production in order to absorb B12, by the way, everybody. So you need really good acid production in your stomach, right? So if all of a sudden you were taking a lot of like antacids, things like that, or like Nexium or Prilosec and stuff, you know, which are like given away like candy, like, or you go to the store, it's all there, you know, to help you with heartburn, right? Or acid reflux, right? That lowers, you know, the levels of B12, lowers levels of acid, and B12 can't be activated.
This happened to my dad. This happened to my dad, Ed, and so I did a deep dive on antacids because I found out once when he first came to me to say like something's wrong. This is before we had a diagnosis or anything, and that's the moment where he got like had never really seen my dad cry, but one other time, and he got really he cried and said like I don't know what's wrong with me, I can't. And so I never expected Alzheimer's, but what I did do was do a deep dive into everything he was taking, and the antacids. If you really look at them, they can affect, if you take them for a long time, okay? If you're taking them throughout the years, they can affect your brain health in a very serious way. And it's because it neglects your system of that B12. Yeah. And so in the beginning, right, I was like, well, we got to get you off this like now, because maybe this is affecting your cognitive, like it'll help you to be more clear. And it did actually when we got him off of it for a certain amount of time. But, you know, the damage and kind of
it progressed,
not just but from that, but from other things in his life. But like it is a very serious thing. People pop them like candy. They're trying to give them to my 5-year-old who they thought was having heartburn issues, and I was like, like that's how much they prescribe these antacids as if they are just like almond milk. So be very careful with that and regulate your heartburn with food, please.
Yeah. Wow. People with
yeah, I mean, I definitely like have always heard, you know, if you take Benadryl or, you know, any like big sleeping, like not Benadryl, well, that's one. You know, a lot of people take. PM. What's the Tylenol PM? That's the big. I had no idea what a risk there was for developing dementia later in life. Really get addicted to sleep aids like that. It's crazy how much these drugs that are seemingly so safe that people use so regularly thinking, oh, it's no big deal, are causing so much damage.
I was one of those people. I have struggled with sleep my whole entire life since I was a baby. And for years, I had to take something to go to sleep. And then the second I realized what it was doing to my brain, I got off of it. And you guys, if you are right now, like Geraldine was like, oh my God, I've been on, you know, antacid drugs for years. Please go watch the live that I did with Annie, because it will give you so much hope, because what she talks about is the fact that at any point in time, we can remove a certain drug from our system. And there are other ways that we can help regulate whatever it is that we're going through. And food is a big part of that. Order her book. and also know that the brain is malleable. And so we, you know, in terms of like our brain volume, we can begin to replenish that brain volume and help to build our brains back just simply by the way that we take care of our bodies. It is so much easier to pop a pill, but the damage that it will do long term, believe me, you don't want to get to that place. So like address it now. I don't mean to ring the bell, but I'm ringing the bell.
Yeah.
It's good news though, because guess what? Even in your 60s and 70s, these are changes that you can make that actually make a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
There's not like a late, you know, a handle. My dad, even all the time, you know, he just moved to Nashville. He's almost 80 years old. And he's been coming over every night. I've been feeding him dinner a ton. And he's like, when are we going to quit eating all this quinoa? And I'm like, Dad, you better settle up because that's dinner in this house, you know? Like, it is not fried chicken and dumplings anymore. And that ship has long ago sailed. And Liz, I'm almost, you know, who cares? And I was like, well, I care. I'm already taking care of Mom, who, you know, has early onset. And unfortunately for you, I'm going to be done out by the time it comes to you. So you better pray you don't get dementia because I'm full.
You guys, my mother was on every single different type of medication for so many things. And just to give you all hope, like she is in her 60s. She has gotten off everything. She only takes like her vitamins. She takes RELEVATE as well, Ed, because everybody in my family does. And, you know, but she just has her vitamins. She eats really healthy. She works out. She goes to a naturopath. Now, I never thought I would get my mother to go to a naturopath. She goes to a naturopath. She works out. There is most likely a solution for almost every problem that you have that does not involve a prescription medication. So just reach out. Liz and I will be doing these lives more often. Ed will be joining us. So like reach out, ask questions, you know, do your homework, right?
Yeah, and you know, just to, you know, I was just thinking, Nikki, what you were saying about how the brain can rebuild itself, right? And of course, you know, we can't rebuild it from the very ground up. You know, if our brain falls out of our head right now, I think we're in big trouble. Okay, but like, you know, if it just kind of like turns to mush all of a sudden and it's gone, and okay, fine, yeah, definitely we can't rebuild it from scratch. But there's this awesome study done. Like it was like early 2000s, a group in Sweden. They showed from a human standpoint that like around like 700 neurons are birthed each day in your hippocampus. And the hippocampus is the first place that Alzheimer's hits, by the way. It's a part of the brain that the Alzheimer's is first. So it's like 700 neurons are just birthed because there are stem cells in the brain and they get activated and they turn into, oh, it's time for me to be born. I'm going to become a neuron. And then they do that. And so I mean, it is rebuilding itself. It's, you know, it's constantly like rebuilding and reconnecting, things like that. So we do have to think about our brains as a very dynamic system, so that we can do things about. So
that's really amazing. I didn't know that. I mean,
that's pretty neat
thing about getting involved in your own brain health is that you're constantly learning and you're constantly seeking more learning. It's fascinating. It's an entire world of medicine that has really never been given a chance to thrive. And it's why I started the conversation today talking about the lecanemab and whether or not this whole amyloid hypothesis has ever even been close to the mark. Because the reality of it is, you know, what we're seeing is there's 6 million Americans living with this disease right now, with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. Those numbers are expected to triple unless we do something about it. And clearly, yes, science always will catch up eventually, right? Like if the NIH throws enough money at researchers who are willing and able to actually do, well, first of all, if they're given the chance by the NIH, if their grants are approved to look into alternative methods of finding a cure, right? And for a long time, that's been a big problem. You know, the NIH has been so focused on the amyloid hypothesis that no money and no grants were given to researchers and doctors that were really fascinated with this whole food as medicine, that there being an alternative way to sort of combat the formation of Alzheimer's disease in the first place. But to the extent we can get there, great, right, with science. But in the meantime, you know, it may not be distinctly proven that like all plants or a plant-based diet means you're not going to get Alzheimer's. But the science is real close. And there's a lot of evidence that supports that eating a plant-based diet does that. So like, why not try? You know, if getting enough nutrients and making sure that your body and your brain are as protected as possible, I mean, what do you have to lose? It is my point. You know, I see people all the time who say like, oh, it's just too hard to eat like that. Or I just love my, and yes, I'm throwing you right now, Lindsay, under the bus, your Diet Coke. Like, no, stop. Just don't drink Coke. Don't drink soft drinks, sugary drinks. Don't smoke cigarettes. It's bad for your heart, which is bad for your brain. I mean, these are just things at this point.
Control your drinking, alcohol.
Yes, control your drinking. And if you
doesn't mean not, like, by the way, I had a great time over the holidays. Great time with my alcohol. It was lovely. And then I came back home and like, you know, I haven't drank since then because I was like, gotta give myself a break, gotta give my body a break, gotta give my mind a break. You know, it's you know, there's a balance to all of it. It's not like you can't eat meat, but like, where does your meat come from? Where are you getting your meat?
And
like,
how much
important. And how much are you eating and how many times a week? It doesn't mean you can't have it. It just means you have to be more mindful about it. Yeah. And that's Annie's whole thing, which I think is such a beautiful thing. It's like, you don't have to wake up tomorrow and change everything about your life. It's these little steps that you can take one at a time. And before you know it, they become a deep part of your life. Like when people come over, I put out a bowl of berries and a bowl of walnuts. If you want potato chips, go to somebody else's house. But like, I didn't even realize I was doing that until, because it was like something that I just do every day now, right? Like that, I didn't even realize that like when you come over to my house, that's what I put out on the table for snacking. And so like, it just becomes a part of your life, these little changes. Like each week, just say, oh, this week I'm going to do this. And then next week, just add something else. Like it's, you don't have to wake up and get, like, it's so easy to get overwhelmed by all of this. It's honestly micro mini steps that you have to take.
Yeah. It is
each week.
And it's being to, and I love, I don't even remember where I heard this recently. I mean, that's the story of my life now. I like hear all these great bits and tidbits of information and then I can't remember exactly where I heard it. But, you know, you need to think at the time, I would say everybody, about what you want. It might have been Annie, actually. I think it was. That you want to think about where you want to end up, you know, in 20 and 30 years. Do you want to be hanging out with your kids and your grandkids and helping your children raise their children and being a source of wisdom and guidance and help and yourself getting to be able to reap the rewards of all the hard work you did, you know, or do you want to be a burden on your children? And I think when I started thinking about it that way and really it changed the paradigm with which I'm now having this conversation with others. And very clearly, because I'm in the worst part of this disease and I'm witnessing it every day right now with my mom, I'm probably a lot more aggressive, you know, with this information and with this knowledge than I otherwise should be. But I'm witnessing the effects of not taking your brain health seriously and not doing everything that you possibly can to try and eliminate this happening to yourself and to your family. Because the truth is, we all want to protect our children, right? From everything. We don't let them watch too much TV. We feed them healthy food. We take them on, you know, trips to the museum and the park, and we engage them 24/7, trying to do it better than the the last generation did. But we're really not serving them any better if we're just going to be totally dependent on them by the time we're, you know, in our 60s. So it's just really important that people pay attention to this movement that's happening, because I hope it's not going anywhere. If anything, I hope it gets stronger.
It will get stronger,
And these brain health ambassadors that we're creating, you guys, just the network, and it keeps exploding. But I mean, for me, RELEVATE, oh my gosh, it's like the simplest thing you can do. You're literally, I bet you spend more on lattes at Starbucks every month than you would on this product. And I charge each and every one of you, seriously, just try it. I mean, if you don't feel any different in 30 to 60 days, you can personally call me and I'll pay for your last. Hunter's
like, hold up.
Whoa.
About that
She's like, whoa.
I know. No, he's gone. I'm out of here.
But I just want to say, everybody who jumped on, thank you so much for jumping on. We're going to be doing these more often. Ed, Liz, I love you guys. Everybody buy RELEVATE. Okay.
Bye, Nikki.
Ed, you hang on. I've got one more question for you.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so we covered the B12, and also, right, that the alcohol part is a huge stripper of B12. And I'm not really sure, does it kill the acid in your stomach? Is that the reason for that?
So, you know, that's well, alcohol affects so many things that it's kind of difficult to pinpoint. But I'd say obviously it has a lot to do with your GI tract, right, and absorption.
Okay.
So I mean, it's there's that, and B12 is it goes through a few different steps, you know, on its way before it jumps into and goes into the blood. Another thing just to bring up really quick is that if you are on a vegetarian or vegan diet, there is risk that you could be low in B12. Because B12 kind of happens to come from be richest in actually meats. Right now, we were just talking about how meat we don't want to overdo. We do not want to overdo meat,
right?
So especially red meat, right? But B12, if you are a vegan or vegetarian, you want to watch your B12 levels, and you want to make sure that you're either supplementing or you are finding, you know, fortified. Let's see, a good source of vegan kind of B12 would be a fortified nutritional yeast, maybe. Even nutritional yeast doesn't come with B12 by itself; it has to be added in. So it's actually supplemented into the nutritional yeast, and then people can have their nutritional yeast. So that's like if you want to. So either way, you're kind of getting it supplemented, but at least it comes with a nutritional yeast. But you just gotta watch that a little bit. You know, B12 is really rich in some seafoods. That's why, you know, like clams and things like that. So, and shellfish. You know, so anyway.
Does it work if you get injections for B12? And just to side note this, you know, it's funny, my mom was actually misdiagnosed the first time with vitamin B12 deficiency. That's like actually what they thought her Alzheimer's was. So it does play a direct correlation with cognitive health for sure.
Yeah. So I think did somebody ask me a question here, or?
Yes, they keep asking us about, I don't think we ever got to the whole lion's mane thing.
Oh, shoot.
Let's finish this about B12 and then we can go to lion's mane.
So okay. So for B12, the question is injection, right? So, okay, yeah. So for some people with pernicious anemia, which is this inability to produce that little, it's called intrinsic factor, which is the thing that requires the acid that's then needed to pull in the B12. So for people who don't make that intrinsic factor, they can't absorb B12, right? So no matter what, right? So they're in big trouble there, and so they have to inject it straight into the body, right? And so that's for people who have pernicious anemia. Now there's a lot, you know, people, it tends to be out there, so it's something to look for. But so there's these couple factors, right, you want to keep track of, you know, to make sure that to be particularly wary of, right? You know, vegan, vegetarian diet, you know, pernicious anemia, if you're feeling like, you know, really fatigued, things like that, or, you know, or you feel like you have a lot of this kind of like brain fog almost, right? You know, then people might be having the B12 issues.
Anemia the same as anemia, or is there something that a different type?
Let's say again.
Is pernicious anemia different than just regular anemia? Like, is there something special about this pernicious?
Oh, I think they named it that way because they know it's tied directly to the B12. That's why. So it's that's the thing. And so yeah, those are some factors to just look into and make sure of. And B12 is just so important for many other things. But
that's the question that just came up. So, is there a difference between taking a B12 complex and or a B vitamin complex, or just B12? Like, which is more highly recommended?
You know, that kind of comes down to people's status. Okay, so a lot of times, most people like B12 complex or B complexes typically come with like all the Bs. So Bs, they're like, you know, many different B vitamins, B1, B2. So B1 is thiamine, B2 is riboflavin, B3 is nicotinamide, you know, etc. It goes down the line, you know, B6, B9, B12, and for the most part, a lot of people are doing okay in one or another. So if they're adding a B complex, they might be overdoing it a little bit, in some areas. When we were developing RELEVATE, we looked at, okay, well, what do people typically get? Some of the most important ones for brain health are B3, B6, B9, B12. And then we realized B3 and B12 were the ones that we really needed to cover well. So, I mean, a B vitamin complex is fine for some people. One thing that they tend to do, though, that we weren't the biggest fans of, but I can understand some people want to replete themselves with it, is that they tend to put kind of these really big doses in B vitamin complexes. So kind of watch out for the dosage levels there. You can literally have tens of thousands of % of your daily RDA of B12 thrown at you by some of these. Now, they will definitely take the scenic route through your GI tract. Okay, they will definitely, and they'll take a fast one too. It's going to be like the plane tour, right, straight through. But
ice luge, if you will.
So, yeah, seriously. So the ice luge, yeah. And so that's definitely it could be a problem. I mean, B vitamins are water soluble, so they tend to work themselves out pretty quick. So you might just be flushing a lot down, but we always tend to want to stay away from mega dosing on anything, really, right? So
they need to be careful with some of this stuff, because there's so much misinformation out here right now, and particularly in the social media space, about take this, don't take that, take this, but only on two, take that, but only if you're standing on your head holding an umbrella. Like, there's so much.
I've done that one. I'm just kidding. So
there's so much information. Ridiculous. I love you. There is just so much that it's overwhelming. And so what happens is people run out. Number one, they can't afford like really high value ingredients in a lot of these things. So they end up going to Walgreens or, the grocery store or whatever, and buying all of this stuff. And if you walk into any Kroger, it doesn't take a genius to see this. You'll see, like, on all the vitamin shelves, buy one, get one free. They do that for a reason. And then all of a sudden you're overloading your body with just an enormous amount of toxins, because half of it is already rancid, it's expired, or
that's a big problem.
With never in the first place. Don't forget that for the large part, this industry is not regulated the same way that the FDA regulates our food. So it's important that you understand, don't go get your omegas at Costco. God only knows how long they've been sitting there. And you're not really helping your body by putting that inside of it. You're actually making things worse. So it's very important that you kind of do your due diligence on this stuff. And like we were joking at the beginning, I mean, half the time you're paying a lot of money just to have a quick path to the can. So, all right, let's talk about one more part of RELEVATE before we've got to jump off.
Okay.
D. That's also, let's talk about why D is important for our brains.
Yeah, so D, and I'm sure people have been hearing about it too, especially with COVID. D is extremely important in so many different ways. It's one of these only vitamins that actually our body can make, that we really need, that we can make on our own. That probably tells you how important it is. And we make it on our own by running outside and being in the sun, right? Mm-hmm. So, you get some sunlight on your skin and you produce vitamin D, with your own body. Right. And that's pretty neat. And that tells you it is super important. Now, the thing is, of course, most people today, we don't get out enough. And that's a huge, huge problem, especially people who live in, I'm saying this really sounds really weird, but the people who live in, like, obviously higher latitudes, but people who live in the desert Southwest. I mean, they're inside all the time. And the reason why they're inside all the time is because it's so hot outside.
So hot.
So it's almost like you can have deficiencies built up there. Now, D is important for the brain because it does, a few different things. And the first is that it helps with neurogenesis. Now, we were talking about making new brain cells. Helps with that, right? It helps also for antioxidant. So these oxidants are these kind of like byproducts of all the energy that your brain uses, and it produces a lot of, like, think of your brain as an engine, and it's spewing out a lot of exhaust, and it has to clear that exhaust out, right? Or else it'll build up and become toxic. Well, oxidative products are that, and you have to clear it out or cancel it out or basically, neutralize it. And so vitamin D does a great job there. Also, there's a lot of things we don't know about vitamin D that it does, but the thing is, we know that there are lots of vitamin D receptors in the
Mm-hmm.
brain. So those are these receptors that are perfectly geared to grab onto vitamin D, and they're all over the brain in these areas of learning and memory. So we know that vitamin D is needed there because those receptors are sitting there and ready to kind of reach out for and grab the vitamin D as it comes by. So.
Someone asked me a question, and actually, I've had this question myself before. For a long time, well before I ever knew about RELEVATE, and I was taking a few supplements. This was years ago. I kind of just quit taking everything for, I would say, a good 2 to 3 years before I RELEVATE. But I had heard that vitamin D was not easily absorbed unless you were taking it with K. Is that true?
Yeah, vitamin D and vitamin K work well together. Especially for bone health. As far as absorption, I think vitamin D will absorb reasonably well on its own. So we didn't encounter any issues with that. The interesting thing is RELEVATE. We decided not to put vitamin K in it. And part of the reason why is because we know that a lot of people might be on, anti-thrombotic drugs, and K helps with coagulation, right? So we'd be, kind of maybe interacting with that a little bit.
Oh.
So people who might be on warfarin, Coumadin, things that basically are meant to thin the blood a little bit.
Right.
Blood thinner type drugs, right? So we didn't want to drop K in there as well, especially if they're trying to control that. But that isn't to say that D and K aren't good together. They are good together, actually. So you can always add in some K. I think, sometimes they offer D and K together, things like that. So, yeah.
Okay, that leads me to my next question, which is I guarantee if Annie was on this call or a lot of the other people on our board, there would be eyes rolling. But since I'm a 40-something-year-old woman, I'm going to ask it. So recently,
Really?
Well, you just wait for the question. This one's going to surprise you coming from me. But recently, I may or may not have gotten some Botox. So when I got Botox,
Okay.
Ed, no judgment. We've got an event for 300 people coming
Dude,
up.
I heard
Like,
I'm like, my wife brought it to me the other day. Like, she said, you have no idea how many people have done Botox. You have no idea. And I'm like, no. I'm like, what? Really? I'm like, that's kind of scary to me.
Like 26. I mean, literally, the number of girls I saw in the waiting room who looked like they had just gotten their periods yesterday. I was like, what are you guys doing here? Like, get out of here. You haven't even had a baby yet. Like, just there's no way I'm having to sit in this waiting room behind you guys. You all need to leave. But anyways, I'm serious though. So I bruised like crazy. And she asked me, she's like, I never bruise anybody. And I'm like, oh, sure. Like that's what I'm sure you always. And she's like, no, really. She's like, I pride myself on the fact that I don't bruise anybody. And she's like, you bruised really bad. So is there something in RELEVATE? Like, or is it the omegas that cause that?
Oh, shoot. Yeah. So everybody for brain health, anti-inflammatories and antioxidants, which are very clear, they're like kissing cousins to anti-inflammatories. They work together. From plants that Liz was talking about earlier, right? They're very powerful, and there's a few different kinds that RELEVATE has, right? So catechins from like different teas and a certain type of tea, and then anthocyanins from the berries that Nikki was talking about, and flavonols from dark green leafy vegetables and certain other colorful vegetables. So we make sure those are in there because they reduce the inflammation. So I don't know what's going on with the bruising, basically. I was hoping to be less.
She said it was the omegas. She's like, that can cause people who take heavy omegas, sometimes that can happen. And I was like, huh. I was like, well,
okay.
There is.
Well, the only so one thing we're careful about also. So one thing omegas will do, okay, so is that if you take too much, so people might want to say, oh, I'm low on omegas, I'm going to catch up, right? I'm going to catch up now, and I'm going to take literally not just hundreds or maybe 1,000 or even 2,000 milligrams of it, but I'm going to take 5,000. I'm going to take 10. I'm just going to go for it, right? If you go above 4,000, 5,000, that regime there, you can start to cause more. It's basically a blood thinner at that point. So it starts to thin out the blood and makes it so that you don't clot as easily. Maybe that's how much omega do you take?
Only RELEVATE.
Okay, all right. So RELEVATE should be fine. RELEVATE should be fine because, you know, what we did was we tied it to the dosage to a study that was done in 2007 in DHA, that's phosphatidylcholine based, and you know that's why we have roughly 200 milligrams of this specialized form of DHA in there. So.
Okay.
So we're not talking like, so people aren't going to get like 5,000 milligrams of omega-3 with the product.
I just thought it was worth mentioning, like you never know. I mean, they tell you not to take somebody else's thing. They tell you to stop taking your omegas before surgery.
Yeah, so, well, that's the bleeding problem, I think, or issues.
That should tell you something about how good this product is, though. Like, if it does cause just like a little extra bruising or whatever, it's doing its job. It's making your heart health better, and it's making things flow more efficiently. And I don't know. I think for me, at least, I was like, oh, that's an even added bonus, like I take the bruising.
Well, okay, I hope it went away. I'm like sitting there going, wow, no, actually, so yeah, it is potent. I mean, the DHA that we put in, so it's potent given its form. But maybe I don't. Yeah, Liz, you might want to tell people who are planning to maybe do, like, if a Botox bird just happens to land on their, anywhere, then there might be a little bit extra. I don't.
Yeah, just like take a couple days off maybe before you go. Well, Ed, this has been so fun. I love you so much, and I feel so passionately about this supplement. It's really truly the best. I tell every single person I know to take it. I've given the bottle to so many people at this point. I'm just so proud of you and Maureen, who helps you with the company. You guys have done such a phenomenal job. And for anyone who's listening, you need to follow Ed. Go to NeuroReserve. We'll post a link on how you can follow Ed and follow this journey of this growing company. I think small companies more than anyone need our support, and they need our help right now. It's a great time to support them. So I know the economy's tough, and it might seem like, what is the going rate right now? Is it $79 a month, $84 a month?
Oh, if people go on like a regular delivery, and they can choose however often they want to get it, then it's $69, per month. Yeah. Oh, but hold on. Wait, hold on a second. No, it's gonna be $59. Do you know why? It's because everybody, if you're listening to this and you decide, hey, I'm gonna order RELEVATE, use a code. It's called Mind What Matters 15. Shoot, we almost forgot to say that, Liz.
And then you are going to help save the life of a caregiver. So
that's right. That is a donation triggering code. So please do that, because it's Mind What Matters 15. I know it's a long one, but use Mind What Matters 15, all in one word, and that will give you 15% off. But it will also send 15% of that order to Mind What Matters, and that's it's an ongoing thing that we do at Nerves. It's just an ongoing thing.
You are ridiculously generous, by the way, to do that. And guys, I have other companies that do that for Mind What Matters, and I'm not on Instagram Lives promoting them. So hopefully you all know at this point that I just don't do that, period. And that's not what this organization is all about. But in this case, it's really about promoting your brain, protecting your brain as you age. And I think that we just all need to do what we can. There's a lot of factors we can't control, but this is one of them. And it's just a very small thing. I mean, $59, that's literally 10 Starbucks coffees a month, So, or Diet Cokes, Lindsay, looking at you. So do us all a favor.
Lindsay's taking it on this IG Live.
Well, she was at my house yesterday. She's a very good mutual friend of Nikki and I, and I told her I was almost going to wrestle her to the ground if it took that to get the Diet Coke out of her hands. But anyway, please, just try this product. It's not anything that it's going to hurt you, and I think you'll be very surprised with just how great you feel. I mean, my hair, my nails. I'm a 42-year-old woman, and we never got to lion's mane, but here we go. I've got a lion's mane.
So Yeah. So yeah, yeah, a couple of things I just want to say really quick is RELEVATE. We based it on the mind and the Mediterranean diet. So that's really incredibly important because the evidence is the strongest there when it comes to. We just want to help people achieve the most brain healthy diets, and the mind diet. You can look that up. It's an acronym, MIND. Is one of the
say what that's for.
best diets.
It's Mediterranean Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay, correct?
Right. Yeah. So,
Okay. Say
and
that fast.
what's that?
Say that 5 times fast.
Oh, I know. Seriously. So wonderful, wonderful diet. And when we said we're going to develop something, that's what we said. We're going to anchor all our thinking, all our philosophy and design around it, because we need to help people achieve that diet. So you got to work on your diet, everybody, but we know it's tough. That's
hard.
what RELEVATE's for. And we don't want to get to the point, where we're diagnosed with anything, right? We want to do everything we can, and nutrition's a big factor. So
And we know for caregivers, especially hard, to eat healthy and to fix, meals for yourself. But this is a small thing that you can do. Anyway, Ed.
And when I founded NeuroReserve, it was, given my own family history and everything that happened, it was so important to make sure that NeuroReserve contributes to the caregiver community. So that's why it's just so wonderful to hang out with you, Liz, to do what we can to help out Mind What Matters.
You do a lot. You do so much.
So it's hugely important because everybody who's been through this knows what it's like. So anyway.
You don't want to walk it if you don't have to, and we certainly don't want to be a burden to our kids. So we're all going to do what we can, and then we're going to help spread awareness, right? That's the key.
Yes.
The big takeaway I want you guys to take away from this live is that not only do we want you to take care of yourself, but we want you to go out and share with everyone else everything you've learned and why it's so critical and just so important. So thank you so much, Ed, for your time this morning. And as Nikki said, we'll be doing this lots more. Annie and Nikki and I are talking about doing a little series on Monday mornings called Coffee Brain Health Talk.
Ooh, yeah.
We
about whatever topic, there's so many topics to hit. So
there's so many. We're at the tip of the iceberg with all of this, but I really think it's an exciting time. And despite the setbacks of learning about, the drawbacks of lecanemab, did I say it right?
Lecanemab, yeah.
Gosh, they're all like a mouthful. Remember the first one, aducanumab or something?
Aducanumab, and that one was, it didn't really work out very well, but
we all should have known when we couldn't pronounce it, right? People to say these things, but anyway, it's an exciting time, and we are really all very hopeful for there to be change and for there to be a cure for Alzheimer's. But until there is pantry full of healthy food and a refrigerator full of healthy food, and there's RELEVATE, and we're all going to do it.
Yeah, we don't want to get to that point. Not at all. Even, just remember that it's going to be a while with the drugs we have now. So there's one of my medical advisors said this. His name's Dr. Dung Tran. I'll give him all the credit here. He said, think about the new drugs for Alzheimer's as the very first cell phones back in the 1980s that you saw on Miami Vice. Okay. Right. They were about this big. Okay, they worked like crap. All right, but they did something that kind of, but they're really clunky. They ran out of battery life within a minute. Actually, all that stuff. It's like we got a long ways to go. Yeah,
hello.
Even bigger. It's a box. So we got a long ways to go there. So but let's make sure we work on the prevention side.
For sure. All right, you have great weekend. You have brightened up my week. This has been a tough one for me, and so great to see your face always. You're just
I heard about it. Yeah, so okay, we'll catch up on that later. But have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Thanks, Liz.
Okay.
And thanks, Nikki.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
All right.